Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. President Trump and leaders from the Middle East sign a peace deal aiming to normalize their relations. As part of the agreement, the UAE has become the third Arab nation to recognize Israel. Republican Senator Tom Cotton says he's introducing a bill to revoke China's special trade privileges. Instead, it would subject the country to reviews of its trade practices and human rights records. Joe Biden visits Florida to court Hispanic voters. That's after new polls show Trump leading among the state's large Hispanic community, making Florida a crucial battleground state. The National Hurricane Center says Hurricane Sally will hit the U.S. Gulf Coast sometime between tonight and Wednesday morning. Extreme flash flooding is expected. A Chinese tech company is collecting the data from more than 2 million people around the world, but its close ties to the country's communist regime are raising concerns. And protests continue in China's Inner Mongolia region. Authorities issued notices over the weekend revealing those who refuse to send their kids back to school will face heavy punishments. A milestone was reached today between Middle Eastern leaders. Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain have signed a peace deal in hopes of bringing stability to their relations, including trade, travel, and politics. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the Abraham Accords.
Leaders from Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain strengthened their bonds on Tuesday by signing historical peace deals alongside President Trump, the broker of the trilateral agreements. Trump said the deals mark the dawn of a new Middle East.
After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East. Thanks to the great courage of the leaders of these three countries, we take a major stride toward a future in which people of all faiths and backgrounds live together in peace and prosperity.
Dubbed the Abraham Accords, they aim to normalize diplomatic relations, security, and trade relations between Israel and Bahrain, as well as the UAE and Israel. As part of the agreement, the UAE is now the third Arab state to fully recognize Israel as a country. And Israel has agreed to hold off on taking possession of more land from the West Bank. The Middle Eastern leaders all pointed to more peace in the future.
To all of Israel's friends in the Middle East, those who are with us today and those who will join us tomorrow, I say, Assalamu alaikum. Peace unto thee. Shalom.
This peace accord, which is a historic achievement for the United States of America, the State of Israel, and the United Arab Emirates, will continue to have a positive impact, as we believe that its reverberations will be reflected on the entire region.
What was only dreamed of a few years ago is now achievable, and we can see before us a golden opportunity for peace, security, and prosperity for our region.
President Trump said other nations would follow these countries very soon. Critics of the Abraham Accords say it ignores Palestinians, but it is hoped that the deals will result in better Arab-Israeli relations overall. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Jewish activist and former Democratic lawmaker Dov Hikind was invited to the signing of the Abraham Accord. He says the deal will bring warm peace, unlike previous deals. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more from the White House guest.
Mr. Hikind says the trilateral peace deal is going to set an example for other Middle Eastern countries to follow.
You know, people have talked about the realignment in the Middle East as a result of Iran. But now it's actually happening. And as I said, this is a warm peace, not a cold peace. You know, Egypt and Jordan, there's no real exchange of tourists between the two countries. This is going to be very, very different. So you might say this sets an example for the rest of the Middle East.
President Trump has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice now over the Abraham Accords and another peace deal. But Hyken, who says he didn't vote for Trump because he doesn't like some of his behavior, says a Nobel Prize won't suffice.
Maybe not everybody is thrilled that it's happening with Donald Trump and he's getting the credit. I can only imagine if Obama had done the exact same thing. Would be the biggest thing since apple pie. But look, you can't run away from success. This is success.
Meanwhile, the Democratic Speaker of the House called Trump's successes in the Middle East a distraction, saying the lack of an agreement between Israel and Palestine signaled failure. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
As of today, there are fewer than 200 al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan. That's according to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Either for the first time now in 20 years, Afghans sat down together to begin to pound out what a reconciled, peaceful Afghanistan might look like, under no illusions about who we're negotiating with, who these parties are, how difficult that process will be. But it's a recognition of the reality of the things that America has accomplished. There's fewer than 200 al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan today.
The last deal between the U.S. and the Taliban happened in February. The deal didn't call for a ceasefire, but did pave the way for fewer U.S. troops in the country and brought guarantees from the Taliban not to use Afghanistan for terrorist activities. And Senator Tom Cotton wants to strip China of its permanent most favored nation status. He says the special trade status is what caused the loss of American manufacturing jobs to China. He'll introduce a new bill this week.
Senator Cotton, an Arkansas Republican, said the bill would instead make China's status subject to an annual review and approval.
This week is the 20-year anniversary of granting China permanent most favored nation status, something that Joe Biden voted for and that he still defends to this day, even though making that most favored nation status permanent and automatic, putting it on autopilot every year, led to the so-called China shock when we sent millions and millions of our manufacturing jobs to China.
The move to give China the status normalized trade relations between the United States and China. It also opened the floodgates to American investment in China and encouraged U.S. companies to develop China-centric supply chains. Cotton said that by making the special status subject to annual review and approval, this would put pressure on China's communist leaders to uphold their trade obligations and the rights of their own citizens.
What happened before 2000 is that the president and the Congress would review China's progress towards being a market-based economy and protecting human rights. There were some pretty fierce debates in the 1990s on an annual basis about Chinese backsliding, especially after Tiananmen Square. We need to go back to that approach.
The Trump administration has criticized China for unfair trade practices like intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. In 2018, President Trump launched an effort to rebalance the U.S.-China trade relationship. When negotiations on a trade deal stalled, Trump imposed tariffs, which now total around $400 billion.
Joe Biden makes his first campaign visit to Florida since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee. He's courting Hispanic voters. This comes after new polls show Trump leading among Hispanic voters in the state.
Biden made clear the purpose of his Florida visit after his Delaware speech Monday, saying, "I'm going to work like the devil to make sure I turn every Latino and Hispanic vote." Today in Florida, where 27% of the population is Hispanic, Biden attended a Hispanic Heritage Month event in Kissimmee. He also visited Tampa, attending a roundtable event with local veterans. At the event, Biden criticized Trump for reportedly calling fallen veterans suckers, an allegation which came from 4 anonymous sources. Trump has denied the accusations. Contrasting himself to Trump, Biden said if he's elected president, he will have veterans' backs.
I want every single member of the armed forces, our veterans, their families, their caregivers, and their survivors to know I will never treat you with anything other than the honor and respect and dignity you deserve.
Biden's visit came after the Cook Political Report on Thursday moved Florida from lean Democrat to toss-up, meaning the state could swing toward either candidate. New polls also show Trump is leading among Hispanics, making Florida a crucial battleground state. Trump is especially popular among Cuban Hispanics, and Democrats are contributing his lead to what they are calling conspiracies that the Democratic Party has become socialist. On Sunday, former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg pledged $100 million to Biden's Florida campaign. The money will go toward Hispanic voter outreach.
Last night, President Trump also reached out to Hispanic voters, holding a Latinos for Trump roundtable in Arizona. And President Trump took the opportunity to make a case for in-person voting after Joe Biden and his wife Jill voted in person in Delaware's primary. Trump tweeted saying, "If Biden can do it, any American can do it." Over the past few months, Trump and the Democrats have been in battle over mail-in ballots, with Democrats claiming that voting by mail is the only safe way to cast ballots amid the pandemic. This is not the first time Trump has challenged the Democrats' argument, last month tweeting, "If you can protest in person, you can vote in person," after Democrat governors allowed large anti-racism protests to take place across their states. And Hurricane Sally is making headway towards the southeast part of the U.S. It's grown into a Category 1 hurricane and is expected to make landfall tonight or tomorrow morning.
Hurricane Sally could unleash historic and extreme life-threatening floods upon the central U.S. Gulf Coast, according to the National Hurricane Center, or NHC. As of 1 p.m. Central Time, the hurricane is carrying sustained winds of 80 miles per hour. Hurricane warnings and storm surge warnings are in effect in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. The governor of Alabama urged people living in low-lying areas and near the coast to evacuate.
I know you all want to protect your family and your property, but this is not worth risking your life.
The NHC said the Category 1 hurricane is not expected to strengthen much before it hits land, but forecasters still expect it to be a dangerous hurricane when it moves on shore. The storm is forecasted to make landfall near the Alabama-Mississippi state line, the NHC said. The Hurricane Center predicts there will be 10 to 20 inches of rain, with some parts of the Gulf Coast getting up to 30 inches.
And after the break, we'll take a closer look at a newly released movie about an abortion patient. We hear from a psychologist about what messages the controversial film is sending to teen viewers. A new bill in New York City seeks to ban landlords from running criminal background checks. We talked to some New Yorkers to see what they think. And a new office building has opened in New York City, but the nation's largest office space market is in trouble amid the pandemic. More on that when we return. The second movie featuring teenage women crossing state lines to have an abortion has come out. The name of the film is Unpregnant, and it was released last week on HBO Max. Our reporter Kevin Hogan spoke with a psychologist to learn what message the controversial film is sending to teens.
The movie Unpregnant was released last week with the comedic setting of a buddy road trip to address the controversial and serious topic of teen abortion. The movie features a 17-year-old who becomes pregnant and secretly travels 1,000 miles to get an abortion. Along the way, she encounters other challenges. Jamie Albin is a psychologist and behavioral therapist. She says she can see how the movie sends the wrong message as it amps up viewers with exciting car chases and inspires them with positive relationship building while glossing over what an abortion really is.
I think that's why the movie's getting a lot of controversy, because it makes it a feel-good movie, because you feel really good about the relationship and the development of these two women as characters, but it sort of skips over a lot of the underlying reason why they're on this journey in the first place, which is, this.
The movie's trailer received positive and negative reviews. Some disapproved of the movie, saying it glorifies teen abortion. Others described it as tribal subversion and cultural distortion. Albin says watching the movie may lead to pregnant teens becoming more used to the concept of abortion and being less likely to think critically about what steps they should take.
Over time, when you see media images that habituate a behavior, in a way that makes it fun or non-threatening, in a way that makes you feel entertained by the information and normalizes it.
One of the screenwriters said she wanted to write an abortion road trip story to bring some humor and make people more comfortable with the subject of abortion. Commenters labeled the movie as pro-abortion propaganda.
I'm setting the alarm for 5 a.m.
Albin says the movie sends the message that one should be rebellious, not confide in one's parents, and not turn to friends for support.
So it sends a message like, do the most, impulsive thing that you can do. Abandon your support, don't lean on the support, and don't expect support. Even in bad times, you should expect support from people who are in your life.
Albin says parents should let their children know that if early pregnancy happens to them, they have their support, and the family should talk about it together instead of the child having to go through it alone. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
In New York, landlords may not be allowed to run criminal background checks on new tenants anymore. That's if a new proposal from the City Council gets put into law. It opens up a whole world of challenges. NTD's Phil Zoe reports.
The New York City Council is proposing a new law that would stop landlords from looking into a prospective tenant's criminal records. Landlords are upset, saying this could allow drug dealers and criminals into their buildings. The bill's chief sponsor argued that tenants with criminal records should get an equal opportunity for housing. We spoke to New Yorkers to see how they felt about the new bill.
You should keep the background checks, and the owners have a right on their property to decide who's going to live there.
I understand why you would want to do a background check. You want to make sure that, the building or at least the general community would be safe. You don't want to bring in anything that might potentially, disrupt that.
Another person said they would want to know as much as possible about a new tenant.
I would certainly want to know, everything I could. I want to garner all the information I could about the proposed tenant.
One New Yorker said the ban might actually promote discrimination instead of eliminating it.
If everyone knows that nobody is being background checked, what's to stop someone from assuming that someone they live with, is possibly a criminal or makes them feel unsafe because they're black or some other minority, or because they look like someone who may have committed some crime or other.
The proposed bill also seeks to expand the city's housing voucher program, which helps New Yorkers living in shelters or those at risk of eviction. Phil Zoe, NTD News, New York.
Expect some of your holiday traditions to be different this year. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade definitely won't be the same. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has announced that due to the pandemic, spectators will not be able to watch the 94th annual parade from the streets. The parade will be televised and online. De Blasio promised a reimagined version of the iconic holiday event. The mayor noted he is looking forward to the parade's hopeful return in 2021. And coming up, Chinese authorities issued weekend notices regarding protests in the Inner Mongolia region. Beijing says heavy punishments await those who refuse to send their children back to school. And a Chinese tech firm with ties to the regime was found to be collecting data on about 2.5 million people across the globe. Among them are prominent Western politicians and military personnel. Find out more when we return. In China's Inner Mongolia region, protests continue against Beijing's initiative to replace the Mongolian language with Chinese in schools. Over the weekend, authorities issued notices detailing punishments for those who refuse to comply. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
The back-to-school boycott happening in China's Inner Mongolia region is entering its third week. But Beijing is tightening its grip on the situation. According to the New York-based Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center, at least 9 Mongolians have lost their lives. That's in addition to the thousands that have been arrested during protests. The turmoil sparked weeks ago over a Beijing initiative to replace the Mongolian language with Chinese in the region's schools. Now authorities are hunting down students, aiming to make them return to school, as parents seek to keep them home. Even in the most remote rural communities, locals report a heavy police presence. Authorities in one district issued an urgent notice on Saturday. It demanded that all Mongolian parents send their children to school within 3 days. And for those who don't, authorities will hold them fully accountable. That means if they don't return, students' school registration status will be terminated. Plus, their teachers and even the school principal will be disqualified from receiving promotions for 3 years. Their parents will also face punishment. To start, they'll be prohibited from taking out bank loans. Those who work for the local government will be removed from their posts, while workers will be fired from their jobs. Parents of low-income households and those who are disabled will also no longer receive benefits and disability subsidies. Lastly, a document published on Sunday revealed parents who refuse to send their children to school will be fined up to 5,000 yuan. That's around $700, a huge amount of money for the region's relatively poor population. The document was issued in various districts inside Inner Mongolia. A video posted online also shows the situation of those students who were forced back to school. Many of them refused to participate in class, with some leaning on tables and others crying. Some parents recently began homeschooling their children, like in this video. The language written on the blackboard is Native Mongolian. In what could be a breach of international law, Australian police accessed correspondence of top Chinese diplomats. That's according to an ABC investigation. It's part of a probe into whether China is meddling in Australian politics. Search warrants seen by ABC show Australian police are investigating if there's an attempt by China's Sydney consulate to influence votes by infiltrating the Labour Party. Investigators are searching to find out whether New South Wales Labour MP Shaket Musselmain is involved with Beijing, including his policy advisor John Zhang and the Chinese consul in Sydney, Sun Yantao, who coordinates China's foreign influence agency, the United Front Work Department in Sydney. According to ABC, policy advisor Zhang accused Australian authorities of seizing his emails and messages between top-level diplomats in what would be a breach of international and Australian law. But if Zhang is convicted of foreign interference, he could face up to 15 years in jail. Aside from Zhang, the warrants also name at least 7 other people suspected of being part of the plot to meddle in the elections. 3 of those are journalists working for Chinese state-run media. Federal agents raided Musselmain's home and office in June. Musselmain has denied any wrongdoing. Tensions have simmered between the two countries since Australia questioned the origin of the virus. Australia recently pulled 2 journalists home from China. This after they were questioned by Chinese authorities regarding the arrest of Australian TV anchor Chen Lei in China. Senior officials, meanwhile, told ABC the questioning could be in retaliation to the investigation. And another Australian politician is also facing questions regarding China. Victoria's Labour Premier Daniel Andrews is being asked about his choice to sign on to China's controversial Belt and Road Initiative. It's part of a push to review foreign agreements that could pose a threat to national interest under Prime Minister Scott Morrison's new Foreign Relations Bill. The Belt and Road Initiative in Victoria is expected to be one of the first major deals to be cancelled under the new bill. China, meanwhile, has increased pressure on Australian exports. The General Administration of Customs in China is imposing enhanced inspection on shipments of Australian wheat. According to the Australian government, China is one of Australia's biggest wheat exporters. In 2017, China imported nearly $400 million worth of wheat from Australia. This comes after Beijing imposed a crippling 80% tariff on Australian barley in May.
Direct evidence of China's monitoring and data collection of foreigners has emerged. A Chinese tech company with close ties to the communist regime is reportedly collecting data of nearly 2.5 million people around the world, including over 50,000 Americans.
Heads of the state from the UK, Canada, Australia and India Prominent politicians and their family members, military officers, the British royal family, and promising entrepreneurs whose startups are developing cutting-edge technology. These are among the 2.4 million people targeted by one Chinese company, which has been developing a massive profile database over the past 3 years. That's according to media reports about a leaked database developed by Zhenhua Data, a tech company from China's Guangdong province. Translated from Chinese, the company's name means China Revival. The database was initially obtained by independent American researcher Christopher Bolding last year. Several media outlets from India, Australia, the UK, and more revealed it. According to a new research paper co-authored by Bolding and cyber expert Robert Potter, the majority of the data was collected from publicly available sources. That includes social media and news articles. But the experts say the sheer scale of the data is concerning. The experts also point out the Chinese company's close ties with the communist regime. The company maintains extensive partnerships with China's defense and intelligence agencies. The company told Chinese state media that their operations are part of normal business behavior and accused Western media of misinterpretation. China Revival took down its official website after the report was published. A former employee of China's controversial tech company Huawei says it's an open secret that Chinese companies collect intelligence for the regime. He left Huawei in April 2019.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. Other than China Revival, there are companies in China's Fujian and Zhejiang provinces that also do it. Huawei and the semiconductor producer SMIC have all done it. They are backed by the CCP and the Chinese military.
Jin said China could potentially use the data to influence elections in democratic countries.
Manipulate elections, targeting certain demographics and sending them disinformation, or target public figures that the CCP doesn't like, then make up rumors to discredit those people.
Media reports also reveal the company's interest in Australia's space and science sector. So far, it has tracked the movements of Australia's top-secret space equipment. The company's CEO, a former IBM employee, has said on Chinese social media that data collected from social media can be used for hybrid and psychological warfare. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Still to come, the latest data shows U.S. manufacturing continued to grow in August, but at a much slower pace than before. And one retail forecast says it expects sales to increase up to 1.5% this holiday season. Above-average earners are expected to drive sales, partly due to cutting expenses over the last few months. More on that after the break. U.S. factory production increased for a fourth straight month in August, but the recovery is showing signs of a slowdown. The Federal Reserve's new report shows that manufacturing production rose 1% last month. That's much lower than the almost 4% increase in July. Motor vehicle production dropped in August after a sharp increase in July. But production of furniture, electronic products, and apparel rose. Overall, factory output is still about 7% below the pre-pandemic level. And consulting firm Deloitte expects holiday sales to increase this year. It says middle and upper class Americans will have more money to spend since they've been locked down all year. But physical stores are expected to lose out to online sales.
Consultancy firm Deloitte has forecasted U.S. holiday sales to increase up to 1.5% to as much as $1.15 trillion. The trend is expected to lean towards online shopping and away from brick and mortar. Online sales could rise by 25 to 35%. Deloitte's U.S. retail and distribution leader said the overall sales will be slower than previous years, but a surprise increase in back-to-school spending and higher savings rates could signal a strong demand between Thanksgiving and Christmas. High and upper middle class earners are expected to drive retail sales from 2 to 3% because they haven't been spending as much on travel and other expenses during the pandemic. Lower income brackets are expected to stay flat up to just 1% as government spending dries up. Consumer spending accounts for more than 2/3 of U.S. economic activity. Big box chains are expected to do better than independent ones as shoppers consolidate trips. Walmart, Target and Home Depot have seen sales surge through e-commerce, but analysts say their supply chains could come under immense stress during the holidays. Brick-and-mortar sales could fall as much as 3.4%.
And FedEx is ready to cash in. It's getting ready to hire 70,000 workers for the holiday season. It expects to be busy, and business has already been good this year with people working from home. The company also announced that it will increase its shipping rates at the beginning of next year. And an unconventional way of detecting so-called virus superspreaders might be on the horizon. A breathalyzer invented to detect marijuana on people's breath might be able to pick up the CCP virus too.
The marijuana version of the breathalyzer measures minuscule amounts of THC on users' breath, the psychoactive component of weed. The device is made in California by Hound Labs. They said that small-scale tests in their state and New York have shown the breathalyzer can detect the CCP virus in breath. Only some people with a positive nasal swab also had detectable levels of the virus in their breath. Hound Labs CEO Mike Lin thinks that people with the virus in their breath are the most contagious and could potentially be so-called super spreaders. Lin is also a practicing emergency medicine physician.
So we tested a swab and then we tested breath. And of the people that had a positive nasal swab, about 25% of them also had breath that was positive. But the other 75% didn't.
He added that those results are in line with what is known about virus spreading. According to him, around 20% of people spread it very fast, but the other 80% don't spread it at all or only to a few people. But he added that this doesn't automatically mean that someone with the virus in their breath is a super spreader.
Before anyone can say definitively that the presence of COVID-19 in breath means somebody's a super spreader, there needs to be a comprehensive clinical trial.
Phase 1 of testing was conducted in partnership with the New York State Health Department in a hospital setting. The virus was detected in the breath of 1 patient out of 14.
Up next, the British government has issued new travel advice for citizens traveling to China. You could be arrested just because you take photographs in a particular spot or make some political statements. And the existence of extraterrestrial life has long been one of the paramount questions of science. Well, a team of international scientists have detected signs of life on Venus. More on these after the break. Over to Europe. The British government has issued new travel advice for China, highlighting to British people the dangers of arbitrary detention in the country, a reflection of recent incidents. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to our NTD UK newsroom with UK and European news. Britain has issued a new travel advisory for China, warning Britons they may be at risk of arbitrary detention. It directly says certain activities could be problematic, including photography near sensitive sites, engaging with political groups or charities, and preaching and distributing religious materials. The advisory highlighted one particular group with the statement, "The Falun Gong movement is banned in China." Falun Gong, a Qigong meditation practiced globally, has been persecuted by the Chinese Communist government for over 20 years. A spokesman for the British Embassy in Beijing said the advice had been updated to, quote, clearly and factually reflect recent incidents. And British Health Secretary says the COVID-19 testing system is facing an enormous challenge after a sharp rise in demand for tests.
Matt Hancock says the government is working around the clock to fix operational challenges in its COVID testing system and will solve the problem in a matter of weeks.
We've seen a sharp rise in people coming forward for a test, including those who are not eligible.
An increase in demand for tests has led to local shortages, with some people being directed to test sites hundreds of miles from their home. According to government figures, around 220,000 tests are processed each day, with a testing capacity of more than 350,000.
The capacity constraint that there is in the labs rather than the centres.
Hancock says the government has prioritised testing according to need and could implement further steps to ensure tests are given to those considered a higher priority.
And the British Home Secretary says she will call the police on anyone who defies the new ban on gatherings of more than 6 people. Priti Patel says people need to help stop the spread of COVID-19, and that includes calling the police on neighbours. She even suggested families who chat with friends they bump into on the street were breaking the new law. The rules restrict indoor and outdoor gatherings in England. People who repeatedly break the rules face a fine of over $4,000. Greek police have arrested 5 migrants over a fire that burned the Moria refugee camp to the ground.
Greek officials say the fire was deliberately lit by camp occupants after quarantine measures were imposed following the discovery of COVID cases at the site. Authorities detained 5 migrants and are searching for 1 more person. Last Wednesday, Moria camp was destroyed, leaving more than 12,000 people homeless without food and water. Lesbos and other islands off the Turkish coast have been among the main entry points for migrants into Europe for years. Some residents on Lesbos Island, where Moria camp is located, say they are fed up with the camp.
It's sad, but we can't do anything. We feel sorry for them on the one hand, but on the other hand, we want them to leave.
The migrants themselves are demanding to leave Lesbos Island and are against creating a new camp. The Moria campfire has put the migrant issue back on the European agenda. The EU Commission is presenting a new migration and asylum pact this week.
And Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny shares a picture on Instagram from hospital. The 45-year-old is sitting up in bed with his wife, son and daughter. In the message he says, "Hi, this is Navalny. I miss you all. I still don't know much about anything, but yesterday I could breathe all day on my own, actually on my own." He is recovering in a German hospital after collapsing from a flight to Moscow on August 20th. 3 independent European labs say he was poisoned by the nerve agent Novichok. An international team of scientists say they found potential signs of life on Venus.
Researchers found small traces of phosphine gas in Venus's thick, toxic atmosphere. The team behind the study was so surprised by their initial findings, they sought to confirm the data using an entirely different instrument in another location.
I was just stunned. I did this as an interesting experiment. I'd never really thought about detecting it.
On Earth, phosphine is produced by bacteria growing in oxygen-starved environments. Currently, there is no known chemical or geological process on Venus that produces phosphine. The scientists say detecting phosphine is not robust evidence for life, but does indicate some unexplained Venusian chemistry.
We think something is a process that's making it, and one of the possibilities is it's small floating organisms.
The research now continues to either confirm the presence of life or find an alternative explanation.
And a French diver breaks the Bifins deep diving world record, reaching 112 metres.
24-year-old Arnold Gerald descended to a depth of 112 metres off the coast of Kalamata in Greece. That's about 7 feet longer than a football field. Free diving relies on holding the breath until resurfacing. Gerald was training to reach 111 metres, but the day before his attempt, rival diver Russian Alexei Molchanov set that record.
I had to accept that I needed to reach 112 metres for a world record. It's not easy to put yourself in that position on the eve of a dive.
He had already reached 111 metres 5 times while training. Now he just needed to go a bit further. The Marseille-born diver completed the record dive in 3 minutes and 24 seconds.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching. Over to New York.
Thanks, Neil. And up next, a heat wave has brought the sun back to Germany. Residents are basking in over 85-degree heat and enjoying a hot late summer. And a restaurant in South Korea is innovating while staying in line with social distancing measures. Their food is not being served by humans anymore, but by robots. More on that when we come back. Germans were preparing to go indoors and turn the heat on, but out came the sun again, bathing Germany in over 85-degree heat and giving the country a hot late summer.
Temperatures stayed above 80 throughout the whole country. Germans in Cologne and Berlin took to the parks and the rivers to enjoy the unusually warm September weather.
Wonderful. The sun is shining. What more do we need? That's why we're here. We're walking along the River Rhine, looking at the water, and then we'll sit down in the shade.
Tuesday was the fall's hottest day for Germany, and it started with a warm night. Temperatures after midnight were still over 70 degrees. Some Germans appreciated the late heat wave.
Yesterday we went swimming. What was the place called?
Rondenkirchen. It was nice, finally some more summer. Now that we're on holiday, we can also enjoy it. We're happy about the nice weather.
The late summer isn't expected to hold on for very long. Polar air is expected to hit Germany on Thursday. Temperatures will drop significantly to a maximum of under 70 degrees in most parts of the country.
A restaurant in Seoul, South Korea is promising the safe delivery of food to its tables. They're trying to keep in line with social distancing measures, and they're doing so not with humans, but with robots.
Aglio Kim is the 4-foot trolley-like robot who brings the food to the customers in the Italian-themed restaurant. It uses artificial intelligence, simultaneous localization, and mapping. It helps the robot to avoid obstacles and navigate around customers. South Korean telecom company KT Corp developed the bot.
As a telecommunications company, we have expertise in networks. We put 5G technology into robots to enhance accuracy and security. This robot also can deliver up to 4 tables in one go with AI technology.
The AI robot is equipped with food trays which can carry more than 60 pounds. It also has an LCD screen and speaker that communicates in both Korean and English.
Customers found the serving robot quite unique and interesting, and also felt safe from the virus. They could enjoy their meal and be in a pleasant mood.
KT aims to supply more restaurants. They plan to unveil a second model with voice recognition technology early next year.
Have a nice time.
Researchers in Croatia have captured a rare sighting of a 50-foot fin whale. It was swimming in the waters off the country's Adriatic coastline.
Whales used to be common in the Mediterranean Sea. Now they're rarely spotted venturing into the Adriatic so close to the shoreline. Sightings have also been reported this year off the coasts of Montenegro and Albania, which are further south. The fin whale was filmed swimming in the Velebit Channel. That's a narrow body of water separating Croatia's coastline from nearby islands. Now the researchers are conducting various tests, such as getting samples from the animal, checking its health, and finding out where it comes from.
All of this has an ultimate goal, and that goal is to find out how important the Adriatic Sea is for fin whales, and to promote protection and preservation of this species.
The researchers took samples of the whale's skin tissue for DNA analysis. They hope it will provide valuable data for tracking the animal's migration patterns. The method they used takes a piece of skin the size of a fingernail.
We managed to take a small tissue sample. We did a small biopsy on it. The whale, as you saw earlier, did not react at all to this method.
He added that the mammal didn't show any signs of fear or panic, or that it was in pain. The whale provoked a lot of interest, and people were eager to share their experiences. The Blue World Institute received around 200 calls from people spotting it. The institute said it was grateful for all the calls because the information gathered helps them to raise awareness about what's going on in the Adriatic. Some of the people were shocked by the sight of the 50-foot creature and avoided swimming for a few days. But apparently, swimming wouldn't have put them in any danger.
So I'd like to add that this species, fin whale, is completely harmless to humans, so there's really no reason to feel alarmed.
The fin whale is the second largest species on Earth after the blue whale. Its global population has roughly doubled since the 1970s, following international bans on commercial whaling.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Washington's ban on Chinese tech giant Huawei is taking effect this Tuesday. The tech giant may have to withdraw from high-end smartphones and the 5G equipment market. A Chinese tech company with close ties to the communist regime is collecting the data of nearly 2.4 million people around the world. Australia is probing into whether China is meddling in Australian votes, and another Australian politician is being asked about his choice to sign on to China's Belt and Road Initiative. China state councilors said that China will be a high-income country in 5 years from now, but 5 years ago he already said exactly the same thing. And when human rights lawyers in China are sent to prison by authoritarian regimes, their families continue their fight. Tune in at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time and tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to watch the full China in Focus.